In today's video, we're taking a look at some trade rumors involving Buffalo, Vancouver, and Montreal. Could Tyson Barrie be a potential target for the Habs? This obviously is a plus. We're going to take a look at some injuries, some updates on the Ottawa Senators ownership situation. When can we see more details in the next stage in the ownership process take shape? And we're going to obviously recap and take a look ahead at the playoff actions going on in the NHL. All that coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to cover today. Let's first take a look at some recaps here for what's going on recently in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. Of course, last night action was pretty intense and lots of great games. We saw the New York Islanders get back in their series with Carolina with a big 5-1 victory. Late in the third period, we've seen the 4 quickest goals ever in the NHL history. They scored at 16:09, 16:53, 18:11, and 18:27 in the third period. So like 2 minutes and 18 seconds, they got 4 goals. One of them was an empty netter. First playoff game, first win at UBS Arena for the Islanders. It's nice to see them finally get some offense going and finally have a little bit of an offensive explosion here. But for the most part, it was pretty tight until late, and then they just blew it wide open with like the last 5-6 minutes to go there. So certainly a big win for the New York Islanders. Sorokin was huge for them, and we'll see if they can do it again next game and get this series tied up. The Boston Bruins took a 2-1 series lead by beating Florida 4-2. The series switched, of course, to the Florida arena. The Panthers did not have a good showing on home ice. First 2 periods especially were not great for Florida. Boston had dominated most of the play. Were leading on the scoreboard. At one point, got up to a 4-0 lead. Florida did come back late and get a couple of goals. Make it, you think a 4-2 game might be a little bit closer, a little bit more interesting, but really at the end of the day, it wasn't. The Bruins were playing not only without Bergeron, but without David Krejci as well. Linus Ullmark was a game-time decision, but did end up playing and had a solid outing. We also saw the Wild take a 2-1 series lead over Dallas. Philip Gustafson back in net for the Minnesota Wild. I don't think we're going to see Dean Evason screw around with the goalie rotation again. I think he's going to stay with the hot hand, which makes sense. Obviously, if they lose, maybe we'll see Fleury go back in for at least the next, a little bit here for the rest of this round. It doesn't make sense to kind of go back to a rotation when clearly it wasn't working. I know it's only one game, but if Fleury didn't have a good game or Gustafson did, doesn't make sense to take him out when they're not having back-to-back scenarios here. But the Minnesota Wild came out on home ice with a real solid effort. Dallas couldn't obviously get much going offensively. And the Wild take a 2-1 series lead. It's going to be interesting. I know a lot of people pick Dallas to win, but Minnesota is going to be a real tough team to beat out. And Edmonton and LA, certainly a very interesting game last night. The Kings did win in overtime, 3-2. They take a 2-1 series lead. But man, was that a questionable overtime goal. Connor McDavid finally got on the score sheet, scoring both of the Oilers' goals. The Kings have done a tremendous job between Philip Deneau, Drew Doughty, Mikey Anderson of really neutralizing McDavid. You can't shut him down completely, but this was the first time he has scored in the series so far. But they need in Edmonton, they need more than just Draisaitl and McDavid doing the scoring. And unfortunately, their secondary scoring has dried up, which has been a big part of it. But the overtime winner was a controversial goal, and personally, I think the Oilers got screwed. I think the referees missed it, and NHL, the war room, I guess you want to call it, in Toronto, they look at these plays in overtime, and it was challenged, and it's still, to me, they didn't get it right. So what happened was the puck ends up in the air. It was played by a high stick by Kings forward Gabe Vilardi. At least it looks like it was. To me, when you watch the replay, it sure looks like the puck made contact with the stick. The play continued. They scored the overtime winner. The Oilers challenged because they knew that the puck had made contact with a high stick. Connor McDavid was right there. He put his arm up right away, signifying that it was contact. Of course, that's a habit a lot of players have, but it wasn't called. Challenged, and the war room says that there was not sufficient evidence to say definitively that the puck made contact with the stick, so they couldn't overturn it where it was called a good goal on the ice. So to me, that they really got that one wrong. I've seen enough replays, enough up close between having it blown up and different angles that to me, there's no doubt that it made contact with the stick. Considering all the technology they have, it's really hard to imagine how they could get that one wrong. Also, a penalty call earlier in the game after the second Oilers goal, and McDavid scored, I believe it was on a power play. Leon Draisaitl had given one of the Kings players, I believe it was Doughty, a little tap on the leg as he skated by. Technically, you get him an unsportsmanlike penalty. Now, I do understand technically what he did was unsportsmanlike. He shouldn't have done it. Obviously, they need to be more mature. They need to be more, obviously intact here to not take dumb penalties. But at the end of the day, a lot of that stuff is usually let go. I don't know. To me, the referees definitely changed the outcome of that game. We've seen a lot of inconsistent refereeing. I'm not saying that the referees have obviously been, impacting all the games because they haven't. It's a tough job. I get that. For the most part, every game I've watched, I've seen some calls I agreed with, some calls I didn't agree with. I've seen, calls that were not like non-calls that I thought should be. Like it's all over the place, but that's normal to some degree. But I just find so far, especially in that series, it's really difficult for the players to know what the standard is when the calls are so inconsistent. But we'll have to see. I don't know what will happen here. Right now, as I record this video, the Jets and Vegas Golden Knights are in overtime. And Game 3 of that series is a shift to Winnipeg. The Golden Knights had a 4-1 lead, and the Jets made a big comeback in the third period to get things tied up. Adam Lowry with the game-tying goal with, I think it was like 17 or 18 seconds left on the clock. So that's huge. I don't know how this game's going to turn out. The overtime winner might be being scored here as I record this, but certainly a very exciting game. That's been phenomenal to watch the early game tonight. Of course, later tonight, just getting underway right now with the Leafs and Lightning. We got the Rangers and Devils, and of course the Avalanche and the Kraken all doing battle here tonight as they all play game number 3 of their series. So it should be interesting. I know when it comes to the Leafs and Lightning, I know Vasilevsky's record is 21-2 after a loss in the playoffs. So typically you don't see 2 games in a row where they lose. It's not very common. So we'll see if the Lightning can bounce back now that they're back at home and play more closer to the way they did in Game 1 of the series. Or will the Leafs be taking the lead here? The road teams, for the most part, haven't, been so-so in this series, I know. So we'll see where it goes, but obviously going to be interesting to watch. And the Avalanche obviously need to take, a real caution here. Make sure they come out of Seattle with a series lead if they're going to be able to win this and defend their championship. But the Kraken have been real tough, and now they're heading home. So it should be some great action tonight. Devils, of course, look to make their series a little bit more interesting. Instead of, obviously, the Rangers win, they're going to go up 3-0. So lots of great action to look forward to this evening. The Devils are going with Swede in net. So Venchak is going to be backing up. He's not going to be starting tonight. And now for the Leafs Lightning, Victor Hedman looks like he's going to be in the lineup. He was at morning skate. And we'll see where that goes. But except those games are just getting started as I record here. So I don't have the fine details about the lineups here just yet. Winnipeg Jets top defenseman Josh Morrissey also injured in the game earlier against Vegas early in the first. So that's a big blow, because he left the game and did not return as well. So that's not good for Winnipeg as they try to come back against this Golden Knights team. But we don't know the real severity here, so I'm not sure if it's how things are looking for him being able to play next game or what kind of time frame he might be out for. Now, the Ottawa Senators also are looking to complete their ownership change. We know that. It's been, seemed like lately it's been stalled. There hasn't been much updates. Bruce Garrett put on a new article today, the Ottawa Sun, doing some digging here, saying that it looks like it's going to be about mid-May is when the NHL is going to be asking for the next round of bids. And, of course, these ones are binding bids. And from that group of bids, the NHL and of course, the bankers are looking after the sale for the Senators should be able to pick a winning group and winning bid and try to get everything sealed and closed with the successful bidders. So I know it's been dragging on for some time here. Lots of ownership groups have been into the Ottawa area to visit the team, talk to Pierre Dorion, talk to the leaders of the business side. And obviously we know there's lots of rich people with lots of deep pockets that are very interested in buying this team, getting the new arena built in downtown Ottawa. Just a matter of time before we know who those people are going to be, but obviously it's going to be having a big impact on a lot of Ottawa Senator decisions as well. They have lots of business to take care of this offseason, including trying to sign some top young players to extensions. And of course, new owners are going to want to be deciding too if Pierre Dorion is back, if DJ Smith is back behind the bench. They need to be able to do that sooner or later so this team can properly move forward. I'd hate to see the ownership thing drag on too long, so that this team has to make too many decisions too late in the summer. It could cause them to maybe miss out on other opportunities. So hopefully they get things sorted. If we can get a mid-May bid, maybe with any luck, the deal could be closed and ready to roll here with everything in place by the end of June before the draft and free agency kicks in. That would be a great thing for the team for sure. Now, onto the trade section of the video. There's three things we're going to look at today. I want to start with the Buffalo Sabres. I know looking at Buffalo media, I've seen a couple of articles talking about, what can we see from the Sabres as far as making trades go. The team, for the most part, is drafted and developed players that have been in the organization here for some time. They're starting to grow up together. This team has really taken some big steps forward this year. Obviously, as we've seen, it just came real close and making the playoffs. But a guy like Victor Olofsson, for example, is kind of being surpassed by some of the younger players on the team. Of course, he's also going to be needing a new contract after the coming year. He's entering the final year of a contract that pays him $4.75 billion. He's been a decent goal scorer. He's had 20 or more goals multiple times. He is, however, a very much a power play player. Doesn't score as much at even strength as the team would like. And as a team that's going to be starting to hit more and more longer-term, big money contracts, it's expected that he could be moved as more of a cost-cutting type of trade. And obviously, as some of these younger players kind of graduate and look for bigger roles in the team, might be a case where he can be kind of like an odd man out from that perspective as well. Obviously, like I said, they have a lot of real talented youngsters that have been drafted by this team, and they've got more coming. And to make room for some of these guys to have more opportunity, a guy like Olofsson is kind of becoming expendable at this point. Doesn't make sense in a way for them to extend him. I think it makes more sense to move on and see what else they can find. Of course, they're going to have some players qualify for extensions this offseason, and they're going to be, potentially expensive, like Erasmus Dahlin, for example. In the not-too-distant future, a goalie like Devin Levi is going to need a new deal, and the rest of their players that are still completing their ELCs are going to need extensions as well. So they need to manage their cap. They need to look at their roster. They need to make room. It just makes a lot of sense here based on Buffalo media saying that Victor Olofsson very well could be an odd man out there and could be a player they move on from. But otherwise, I don't think we expect the Sabres to be too crazy active. I think they have a lot of the pieces in place, and they have a lot of good growth that we've seen this year. I think another year together with some minimal tinkering on that team will probably be able to be something that we see stay and help them grow and do even better next year. Now, when it comes to Vancouver, we talked a little about cap flexibility. What could they do for trades? Well, we've talked about JT Miller. We've talked about Brock Besser. And at this point in time, it sounds more and more like those two players, odds of being dealt, have certainly dropped a lot here recently. JT Miller, of course, had a good, strong finish to his season. He obviously has a no-move clause that kicks in after July 1. That's going to be difficult if they ever want to move him after that. But for right now, they have the flexibility. But at the same time, if they move him, how are they going to replace him? This ownership group in Vancouver seems like they have no interest in going through a rebuild. So clearly, if they're going to want to stick with some of these veteran guys to try to win now, he's likely going to have to be a piece of that puzzle. And Brock Besser, as much as I think they were interested in it, he had asked for a trade, wanted a first start. Now it seems like he's rescinding that and wants to stay. And to be fair, I don't know if there's as much of a market for him based on what he was making for a contract anyway, over $6 million, but the way he played just proved to be too difficult of a contract to trade, because we know the Canucks did look into it and had lots of conversations, but nothing got super close to pulling the trigger. So if those two guys stay, who are the other more likely candidates to move? And those are Tyler Myers and Connor Garland. Now, in the case of Tyler Myers, you might say, yeah, with his kind of cap hit, he's not going to be easy to move. But the one thing about Myers is going to make it more attractive is that he's entering the final year of his contract. So obviously there's that. Secondly, out of the money he's making, it's $6 million. $5 million of it is a signing bonus this offseason. Once that is paid, he's only going to have a $1 million salary. So for a team that might be a little more cash conscious, for example, but needs a veteran defenseman who can eat some minutes and maybe be a mentor for some younger players, and there's enough teams like that around the league, Myers might be a great option. If they're able to move on from that contract, that'll give him some much-needed flexibility. The team acquiring him will only pay him $1 million for his services this year instead of $6 million. The cap hit can take care of itself based on being on a team with less, have a smaller cap hit, more flexibility. And it could be a way for them to get out of that deal without having too much worse for wear. Now, they may have to pay a little small sweetener for a team to take that on. But at the end of the day, Tyler Myers makes a lot of sense. Connor Garland could be a guy as well that goes. But the Myers contract should become much easier to trade once that bonus is paid. And the other player we'll look at is Tyson Barrie. I've seen some recent articles as well mainly from the Montreal media perspective, talking about Tyson Barrie maybe being a player Montreal should target via trade this offseason. I've seen other reports saying that it's quite likely that Nashville may not keep Tyson Barrie. They may flip him to another team this offseason, and wondering if, obviously Montreal might be a good destination. He had been linked to that team before, but I think that was for some different kinds of trades. But there was a lot of rumors linking about last year about Montreal and Edmonton getting together, especially Josh Anderson being a team that players from the Oilers really coveted. But of course, now with all the other moves they've made, I don't think that's really going to be possible anymore. But at that point, it was a player that Montreal seemed to be interested in. Of course, he's a offensively gifted right shot defenseman. 1 year left in his contract, not making a ton of money. Montreal's rumored to be trading guys like Joel Edmondson, possibly Chris Weidman. Weidman was a healthy scratch enough this year. He might stick around because he's making under $1 million. I don't know that he really has a spot there anymore in Montreal. I think they might be regretting signing him to that extra year in their contract. But at the same time, if Edmondson or Weidman do move, that's going to create a little bit more flexibility on the back end for starters. Probably create the need a little bit more for a veteran. They still have Savard and Matheson, but if they want to mix in the guy like Tyson Barrie to come in just for a year even and mentor a lot of these younger defensemen, because they're not all great puck movers, but obviously guys like Gooley, Harris, Jacky, they're all going to be looking for playing time. You still got Barron back there as well, and there's other guys that were just signed that are looking for playing time too. So I don't know how young of a blue line the Montreal Canadiens want to go with this summer into next year. I mean, they may decide that they don't want to bring in any veterans. I don't know, but obviously Barrie's a guy that's likely going to be available. I don't think there's going to be any issue with Nashville moving if that's something they really want to do, and it's speculated that it's something that is likely high on their priority list here. But I think there's other defensemen on the Preds organization that are potential, trade bait as well. You're looking at Dante Fabro, who's also been a name that's been up in and out of the rumor mill over the past year or so as well. But Barrie, to me, does make some sense in Montreal, but only if they make other trades and move some other veterans out, and we'll see what happens. But if you see Montreal moving on from some other veteran defenseman, it might make sense that he might be a replacement guy to come in for the year and be a veteran guy who can provide some offense from the right side of the blue line. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.